welcome to this episode of Inside the Vault, Enterprise Bank's podcast series, where we talk about topics of interest to small businesses and current economic conditions. As many of you have seen in our most recent episode, we diverted a little bit from our normal format and got some interesting stories to tell based on our small business clients here at the bank that are either unique and or very successful in their small business endeavors. And in today's episode, we have a gentleman, a long-term customer of the bank who kind of fits both of those bills. So I'd like to welcome Adam Guiher, who is the owner of Living Treasures Animal Park in Newcastle and Keystone Safari Park in Grove City. Just to give you a little quick background, Adam was, again, similar to Joe Callan, who you heard from in our last episode, who now runs Busy Beaver Corporation. Adam is probably one of our other youngest entrepreneurs that we ever lent money to, and we're going to let him tell his story. But his businesses, in addition to him starting in them in such a young age, his businesses are also very unique in that they involve exotic animals and are highly focused on tourism and recreation and visits from the public. I also have with me today, as many of you know, Chuck Lai, our president and CEO from Enterprise Bank, who is very integral in reviewing and approving a number of different rounds of financing for Adam and his businesses, and was involved to a great degree in the construction aspects of Adam's projects, which we can talk about. Chuck, welcome back.
Morning.
Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. You grew up in an entrepreneurial environment, and I think probably from as long as you can remember, we're around exotic animals. Can you give us a little elaboration on your family's business growing up?
Yeah, well, actually, I started out, grew up in a log cabin in the woods with my parents. They had a lot of different animals. They started out mostly with farm animals. My dad sold firewood. They had kind of a little bit of a real estate business with my grandfather where they managed land with different things. So being around the country, and I guess I wasn't around as many people, but I was around a lot of animals. So for me, the animal part was always just kind of came natural. But as years went on, he got a little bit more diversified in the animals he was raising. He started providing animals to different facilities around the country that had exotic animals. And eventually, he got licensed and started raising some of his own animals. And I guess that's how I got into it myself at a very young age and was able to get that experience that most people never get the opportunity to, maybe after college I get a chance to work around some of these animals that I was getting to work with when I was just, 10 and 15 years old. So it was exciting to have that opportunity, I guess, be around at such a young age.
And I mean, we'll get into this a little further, but dealing with any type of animals, livestock, exotics, is a 24/7 job, right?
Yeah, I guess that's, people tell me all the time when we talk about who I am and what I do with the animals. That's my dream job, and I think people always picture that beautiful sunny day, and there's the cute animal, whatever it might be, a giraffe or pony or anything. You're there enjoying that animal, which there is a good bit of that, but you also got to think about the days when it's 15 below zero, the wind blowing, or 95 degrees, and the humidity or the storms. Those are the days that our people, it's not always me anymore. I've got a crew that help, but I guess that's what kind of makes or break you as far as whether you're really an animal person or not, because you got to be able to survive the worst of those times. That's when the animals need you the most. So not everybody realizes that's a big part of what we do. So.
Right. Hey, Chuck, I seem to remember early on in my time here at the bank, one of our former board members, who unfortunately has passed on, has always made the comment that we never want to lend on anything that eats or poops. I'm using polite terminology here.
That's quite the terms that Tom used. Yeah.
So, Yeah, I think it was kind of one strike against Adam right off the bat, but we looked at the fact that this was not a novel type of business for him. He kind of grew up with it.
Yeah, I mean, we always look at as we talked about previously, the character and the work ethic and how active the owner is in the business. And while animals don't make the best collateral for a bank because, we're not going to, we repossess something and then we have a grizzly bear to get rid of. I'm not quite sure how I'd ever even begin to deal with something like that. But in this particular case, because of Adam's dad showing us a work ethic and an ethical business approach, and him kind of growing in that mold and always putting his hands dirty and getting involved. That's kind of those characteristics that we look forward to get behind, and they can't. There's no loan where everything's perfect. You look at it's a matter of pros and cons, and you see how the scale weighs out as to whether you want to get involved or not. But in this case, because of the character of the individuals is what we really zero in on a lot more so than whether they're animals as collateral or something else.
Right, right. So Adam, you grew up in the business, and then and you have to refresh my memory how old or actually young you were when you actually had the opportunity to purchase one of your father's parks.
Yeah, we started talking about it in 2004. It was 2005 when we pulled it all together with you guys, and I would have been 19 years old then. So
Wow.
Everybody was surprised. I guess because I was so young, it was again, one of those marks against me. I guess in a lot of ways, and people that worked with me, most of them were older than me. That was a challenge. A lot of people kind of took the notion that at that age I must have just had the business handed over to me, and of course, couldn't really say it at that point in time. The amount of loans I took out and the things that were, securities I had, or a little bit of pressure on myself to pull it all together. It wasn't
Right.
like it was just handed over. So a lot of ways it was, definitely a learning period for me. I thought I knew what I was doing stepping into it, and then once you got started, you realize there's a lot of things that you weren't really seeing were going to come. As far as how people are going to respond to having a new boss all of a sudden. Even though I'd worked with them for years, in a lot of ways, people knew who I was, and once I was in charge, some people thought, well, who's this kid? Why would we listen to somebody that at his age tell us how to do things? And things had been kind of set in a way for a period of time there, and I wanted to grow and change and do things different, and that wasn't the most popular thing. So, starting out that early obviously has been an advantage in a lot of ways, but also wasn't the easiest path either. To kind of get started and
Right.
and get through over that hump. So.
Well, you're one of the few people that can say you're a well-seasoned entrepreneur at what age now?
I'm 37. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is right as we got going there at Living Treasures, then the economy got a little bit ugly at that point. So again, having the debt and having that feeling that it's going to be tough going for a while. I think that helped me a lot to figure out ways to get efficient and and push ahead some of the changes that maybe weren't the most popular thing with our crew early on, or people I was working with when things started to turn ugly, in the economy. Then we kind of had that excuse like, well, we don't have a choice. This is what we got to do, and
Right.
that helped us to gain a lot of ground.
Right. So, you took over the business at that young age. What was it? Maybe you don't even remember at this point, but what was kind of your vision for that park after you took over, or what did you want to do with it that perhaps your dad didn't when he was running it?
I think I always had different benchmarks from the time we started. I know first year there was about 40,000 customers, or just under that, and I always thought to myself, if we could just hit 75,000, I had different numbers along the years of just how many people. If we could get that many people, we'd be kind of on easy street, or it'd be
Yeah.
so much better. So I think that the first couple of years was mostly focused on just kind of cleaning the place up. It needed some maintenance work done to it. My dad had different businesses at the time, and that one had been around for I think 14 or 15 years when I stepped in. So there's a lot of the fence posts were needing replaced. A lot of that type of work that was just routine things that was time to be redone. So I was focused on that for the first couple of years, just kind of making the best of what we had. And then once I got established a little bit, then we focused on how we could grow things from there.
So your primary metric was like, people through the gate, so to speak.
Get people there, but also do things. I wanted to create a little bit of excitement in the community, so we tried to change how we marketed things. We tried to have different advertising plans than what had happened previously, and also just tried everywhere we could try to get a fresh look. Something was just like coat of paint on the entryway, or just the little things you could do without spending a lot of money, just to kind of show people that it's gonna be a little different here moving forward. Try to get that attention on again. So I think that constant change for a place like us that keeps people interested, wanting to come back, and we developed a lot of fans over that period of time because they could see the changes coming, and people would come back in the fall to see what we had done through the summer, and they come back the following spring and see the progress made over the winter. There's a little bit of excitement there that really helped us.
Right. So give us this, Chuck and I, and we know this, but for our audience, kind of a sense of what the original park has become in terms of its scale, in terms of number of annual visitors, location size. Give a little commercial.
Yeah, so I guess the Living Treasures Park is about it's 11.7 acres, so it's not a huge facility. We have around 200 animals there currently of all different sizes, but I guess our peak season that we had was 2017, right before the safari opened. We had 186,000 people through that year, through that small facility there. And we were bursting at the seams at that point.
And you started with, when you took over, 40,000.
A little bit. It was in the upper 30s. My first year, we almost hit 40,000. That was my target. Or that was one of the goals that I was hoping to reach, and we didn't quite get there. I remember that. And then after that, we grew, each year consistently from there ahead. Took a small leap. So it's not like it happened overnight. But as we cleaned things up and changed things, I had some new animals, and just as we got that excitement in the community, we always just gained a little ground each year, until when we opened the safari. Then we took a little bit of a step backwards, of course, because we're kind of, part of our goal was we need to spread the crowd around a little bit. We couldn't handle so much there. We were parking cars across the highway on the neighbor's land and things like that weren't really appropriate for how we were doing business. It was kind of a liability. It was a safety concern. Right. So we finally, when we got the safari going, that dropped down to now we're closer to 130 to 150,000 people a year, which is still a lot more than what we had, starting out. But it's a number that we can manage at that size of facility. I also, when we started all this, we kind of thought that maybe the safari would be the primary. Maybe someday Living Treasures would relocate everything to the safari.
Right.
Maybe for me, in a lot of ways, it'd be an ideal situation to manage it a little bit easier, to have my eyes on everything every day, that sort of scenario. It's a lot easier said than done, though. I guess just how things play out. We just got to do what's smart for the park. So the other big factor that we haven't talked about yet is our commitment to the animals. Actually, as we built things out, we always tried to make things a little bit better. Whatever species that we're either bringing into the park or animals that have been there for years, we try to upgrade, give them bigger spaces, more natural areas, just kind of modernize things, I guess, to fit into how things are in zoos today, and try to set standards above and beyond what other people have done up to this point. That's probably why we went to the new facility there too.
That's actually a point I was going to bring up a little later, but probably a good jumping off point now. There's always scrutiny on the zoo menagerie business. Is it exploitation of animals? You approach it in a totally different way, and you maintain some pretty significant standards that I'm not sure, and accreditations that I'm not sure the general public knows about, in terms of how you treat your animals.
Yeah, well, it's when you're raising animals like what we do, their health is as important as anything to us. Without them, nobody's going to come our parks anyways. So we've always made them a priority. But as time goes on, as we've grown as a facility, and visited other places and seen the best of the best all around, what the big city zoos are doing, what the biggest private facilities around the country. We look at those things and we figure out, how can we match that and exceed that. And I think that's the key thing. It's not so much about the bottom line. We find efficient ways to build things, try to give large areas, large square footage for the animals where they have safe spaces and things, but you don't have to make it like a temple or, like how some of the big spenders do. Some of these projects can be done for $500,000 that the city might find a way to spend $5 million. You know what I mean? It's just the nature of it. So we try to prioritize making things nice for the animals, but also efficient, so we can operate a business and survive, that way. So I think that's where, that's really what's defined Micro up to this point, is finding that balance between keeping the animals healthy and happy and operating an efficient business where we can grow, reward our employees over time, and see things develop and not just be stuck and stagnant because we're spending all of our money, to try to take care of the animals. Well, you got to grow in that process, or you're eventually going to start losing. So.
Well, I think one of the skill sets, and Chuck can speak to this, as kind of our inspector, construction manager for any of the kind of building projects that the bank finances, is an important part of your skill set is the ability to build things on your own in a custom manner to accommodate a very unique type of inventory, so to speak. Right. So Chuck, you've been involved in Adam's projects at both parks from a construction standpoint. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to, for any type of borrower in a type of business that has a construction component, to have that kind of background and knowledge, which is obviously very important when we're looking at lending.
Well, for us, we limit our role into protecting our loan. That's the major purpose, and there's a synergy with the borrower because obviously we're looking out for their best interest too. And we had a contractor on his Grove City project that was less than stellar in performance.
There's a few of those.
So we would get into situations where they were asking for money that they really hadn't earned what they were asking for, and I think sometimes it's easier if I'm the one saying no than it is if Adam's the one saying no. So we had some of that. I would say we didn't have as much fear of that on Adam's job because, again, you get to know your client too. In our case, Adam, we knew he had the ability to do it himself and had a crew that can do a lot of it to the extent there's a shortfall or something like that, where there are other clients that we do inspections for that we know don't have the ability to do what they're doing. And so the contractor becomes even more important, that we know that person can perform. But we certainly had our issues on that one. It's been a long time. I wasn't really thinking about it, but I do recall us having some discussions where I'd call back and say, am I missing something? This is supposed to be done.
Some of the things I didn't think we were going to be too worried about when we started out, they ended up being big parts of what we did to pull it together. But we also, took us a little longer than expected to get that all on track as well. I think one of the most important things really, Chuck, when you come up and walk around, you would help me to understand, these people that we're working with. It's important that we have high expectations and get what we need out of them, but really, it's me that's on the hook if things don't go well. So getting that reminder, not anybody else would be able to make me understand that, but be able to walk around with you and you'd say, hey, this, you can blame them, but really, it's going to be you that's got to pull this together. That helped me a lot, just to be motivated and understand, what it means to pull something together as far as a business and, in a startup and having all those different things. our permitting was another, huge obstacle there with the safari. So
Well, yeah, we've been alluding to the safari park, so let's get a little bit into that story. So, what was your vision there, and how did it work out, and what you've accomplished up there since?
well, it's a moving target, I guess. We're always, as far as how did it work out, I'm not too sure yet. Ask me in another 18 years, maybe we'll know. But it's currently we're 144 acres. You can fit Pittsburgh, Erie, and Akron Zoo all inside of our footprint there, and still have another 50 acres. So we feel that's pretty special. Have that type of space for the animals. It's just a lot of natural space to take advantage of. We don't have it overpopulated. We try to have got trees and green grass and that type of thing. So that was a big part of what I had envisioned, was trying to create something that just had a modern look about it. Some of the bigger safari parks around the country, I'd visited them and I'd seen the large open areas. Then I'd come home and see, what some of our animals were in, and I felt like, find a way to do better. And eventually, as the park in Newcastle, this Living Treasures grew, got to that point where kind of, we needed more space. I tried to work with some of our neighbors there, and at the time it just didn't work out. We couldn't find a way to buy more land, so we ended up looking at the other location, which early on seemed like kind of just a dream. And then as we had our conversations and started doing the research and the due diligence, I guess, that we talked about, for probably a year leading up to the time that we even pulled the trigger to buy any land or do anything significant, we just just took a period of time to really build up that confidence, that knowledge that we could pull it together. And then of course once we started, then we started getting knocked around a little bit and realized some of that stuff wasn't even what we expected was going to be. And it's just great to have the knowledge that you guys brought to the table in order to overcome some of those things, because a lot of it was just me in some ways as a small business owner. You set the bar, all your expectations, things you want to accomplish, but then when things start falling, you're counting on different people, and things start falling down different areas, then eventually you get spread too thin. And and having certain people that could step in and say, hey, we need to pay some attention to these different areas. Have somebody that could look at the numbers and point out the different differences and things that would help us to bring things back on track. When we were going through the developing phase there. But I think that it was important to us to find efficient ways to do things so we could get the park built out to the point where we had the animals out in the spaces that we wanted to have, but not spend all of our budget to accomplish not enough where we couldn't get people to show up for it. So.
Right. So obviously it's still work in progress, but your first phase of development to open a park, you finished when?
Well, when we first started there, we had in mind that we were going to do the kind of the drive-through sort of, or we were going to have a tour, a tram type tour that would go around the facility. That was going to be the initial development. Once we got into the permitting process, we ran into some snags. Some of the things that were approved early on through the township, DEP at the state level and at the county level, there were some some snags that, where we had to take a few steps back. So we ended up, again, being a moving target. We reevaluated our situation after we bought the land. We started to develop our walkthrough side of our park, which was going to be a future phase. We pretty much flip-flopped the whole thing and shifted our focus to making that part of the park first, getting it open. We started the permitting process in 2014. 2015 we bought the land, and then it was 2018, end of 2018, when we actually got open for the first time there in the walkthrough section. So if you call that phase one, it was late 2018.
Yeah.
2019 I think was probably our toughest season of all, my career, because we had animals leaving one park to come to the new park. We had construction everywhere. The park was open, and some people were saying, well, you're taking all the animals from one park, why do we want to go there anymore? So you had that kind of that negative feel, and then you had the people come to the new place and say, well, there's construction everywhere, why would we want to come here? So it was hard to find the right traction that year. And wouldn't you know, the community gave me Business of the Year for for opening the safari that year too. So they didn't look at the numbers and volunteer share, and it just based on merit that we had built this beautiful park. But it just
and then a little thing crept into all of our lives in early 2020, COVID. So you were kind of you and your types of businesses were kind of in a unique position. So can you talk a little bit about both the challenges but the benefits that your type of business saw from the pandemic?
Early on, the timing of the situation was tough for us because our season was just going to be kicking off. We opened April 1st, and I think it was March when things really started to get ugly. And of course, at that time, there was no talk yet of any of the payroll protection program or any of those different things that were happening afterwards. So, we'd come off of, like I said, probably one of the worst years of my career. I didn't have a lot of resources at that point. We were pretty well spent out as far as what we had available to us. So I was feeling a lot of pressure at that point.
Right.
We found ways, cut costs everywhere we could, but keep the animals well cared for. We did quite a few changes around the park and quite a few changes staffing wise. I got more hands on in a lot of ways. And again, you just find when things get tough, you find ways to get better at what you're doing, and that's what we try to do. Once we got going with the payroll protection program, we had a little bit of understanding. We can survive a few months anyways. With this, till we can maybe get open, or who knows what will happen. Once we got to that point, then I started to think, well, maybe we ought to look at, can we get our drive-through section opened up, because it would be something for the community to come and do that they wouldn't have to be
in contact with
other people, and that's what everybody was looking for at that point in time. So I guess it was, I know when we did the walk around with Jay and Chuck, and we talked about the project, and there's a lot of concern about the future at that point, but we knew we had at least a little bit of security with the payroll protection program. We went over all the details. Enterprise Bank was a big help in getting that all processed too. I remember we were way ahead of some of the other businesses that I knew of that had larger banks I worked with, because I guess you guys had better connections with SBA, right? So that kind of prioritized things. So that part was huge for us. But once that was secured, then we talked about do we build out the safari. I had just enough money really to that we could survive a little while, build it out, and hope that we'd get rolling that year enough to get the income to
it sure did, didn't it?
Right, to survive to the next year. And I know when I explained my plan initially, everybody kind of looked at me like, you gotta be nuts to be thinking we're gonna spend that money right now. But then after we talked it through, and people started to think about the idea that of how it's going to be spread out, and the opportunity to give the community a place to go and not be in contact with other people. And also I knew other safaris around the country that were starting to get real busy because they were experiencing that same situation. So I had the confidence that as long as we could get it built and put together, which it was partway there already, we had to finish it. But I was also nervous that there's a few month window that it's done and it's going to do what it needs to do, or we don't get it done and I'm going to be in a real big hole. So, I think that's what we were all feeling at that time, and we were fortunate that it would go the way it did, that we got it built. I was lucky to have a very good excavation contractor we work with Gray Excavation out of Pendleton. They've helped us for years, and they prioritize our project. I think I called them on like a Tuesday and said, hey, we think we're going to try to do this for this drive-through park. And Wednesday or Thursday they had equipment hauled in, and by the weekend he was there running the bulldozer, getting things going the way we wanted. So I was really lucky to have a couple crews that really stepped in and helped us out that way too, to pull it together. It was a time for us that we didn't know what to expect. We knew that it was kind of a make or break scenario, and just came together the way we needed to in order to get the income that we needed to survive the year, and also the following season have a little bit of growth and development to kind of put things on track for us.
Kind of put you probably. I mean, the restrictions on other recreation and other opportunities for families, benefited you guys and kind of built that base for repeat clientele, I would assume.
I think there was a couple things. The drive-through being so new, it did early on. Early on, we weren't prepared to handle a big crowd yet. We hadn't figured out how to manage the traffic and things. So there were some disappointing days for the customers where they waited in line too long, or kids had to go to the bathroom and they're stuck out in traffic somewhere. There were different scenarios that didn't go as well as we wanted it to. But overall, most people had a great time, and we're thankful. We got I don't know how many families that called in or sent us put messages on Facebook or Google reviews that thanking us for having something like that where they could get out with their family and do something during a time where everybody was pretty depressed and generally wasn't much you could do. So it was a business opportunity in some ways, but it also without what we did, the survival of the park and maybe how things would have played out, we might not have the same outlook on the future that we have now if we hadn't pulled that all together. I'm not sure how it would be. So.
Right. So Chuck, you and I talked several times in prior podcast episodes. This is classic. There were winners and losers related to the pandemic, and we did have a group of customers that were able to adapt quickly and make a positive out of what could have been a big negative.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. I think a lot of people underestimate the pressure that you go through when you're making a decision like we made to open up the park and adjust the plan to allow the driving part of the park to get completed. I mean, if that hadn't gone well, and it went better than I think anybody anticipated, it ended up being. COVID ended up being almost an asset and a help rather than the hindrance that we were all expecting. But the pressure you go through is what separates, the employee versus the entrepreneur. I mean, and being able to handle that kind of pressure and to get through that type of thing, because sometimes it's not a success, sometimes it's a failure. I mean, how many times did Milton Hershey fail before he was successful? And I can remember us sitting there. Just thinking about, oh my God, if this doesn't work, we're in trouble. And we got to really think about how, I always wanted plan B and C, and we were at that stage. I'm like, I'm not coming up with a B or a C, or this has to work. and it did, but I mean, it's just, running your own business is not as easy as everybody thinks it is when you go through one of those situations, because, if it doesn't go through, you lose your house, you lose everything you worked for. It's a real tough situation to be in, and not everybody can handle that pressure and go through what Adam went through and to create the result of what we got.
I think that goes back to what we said early on. I mean, we had a very favorable track record and knew what your work ethic was, and that if you failed, it wasn't going to be for lack of effort. And that's a really important consideration for us when we get into riskier projects, I think. So get through COVID, ends up being a little bit of a shot in the arm, helps you build a client base. Let's bring it around to what we're dealing with today. So the word of the year is inflation. Right. Now, granted, you're a highly seasonal business, so it's a little early to tell what 2023 will bring. But what were your impressions? When inflation started to take hold last year, how did that affect your businesses and the visitors?
Yeah, well, I guess the last couple, 2020 and 2021, we saw growth at the safari there. Of course, when we got to 2022, I had already kind of, I think we had all had some sort of idea that things were going to shift a little bit. There wasn't as much money being circulated, or it just seemed like everybody was excited to spend the last couple of years. Something was going to have to change with that, and so I kind of I could feel that there's going to have to be some adjustment, and I think over time we're seeing our drive-through area is not as busy as it was. Fuel prices are a little higher. And again, like you said, inflation, people are maybe being a little bit more careful with their extra spending. Also, if you plan a family vacation, nowadays you plan a year in advance. A lot of people that had all that money the last couple of years, that came in from the different programs that were out there. Maybe they were making commitments for this year to go to travel to large vacations and things like that, and then things get a little bit tougher than expected. So then maybe you don't spend as much as you would locally on places like ours. So
Yeah.
I felt like we survived the year, but it wasn't the growth that I always hoped for. I was whatever our benchmark is or the best we've ever had. I want to do a little better the next year. You know what I mean? That's always, as a small business owner, I guess how you should set that bar. I feel so when you see that things are maybe going to change, you got to find ways. How are we going to get a little more efficient? How are we going to adjust? And we find those ways. And right now, we shifted certain things that we do, shifted some focuses and things just to be prepared for what we think are going to be a little bit tougher times for a little while. But I also feel that maybe next year, now that this is kind of set in,
to get back to people doing local travel.
People are going to want to stay local.
Yeah.
Maybe it's actually, I know back in 2008 when everybody was panicked, myself included, Park had a great year because we were that cheaper alternative to a big family vacation or something like that. So I think that we'll get by it, right? I just you don't want to pretend like it's going to be gangbuster year every year where
Right.
It's going to be endless growth and expansion. You got to be prepared for changes like this. I guess what I think is going to be people being more careful, with what they're spending their money on, and we just got to be ready for that. So.
Right. So Chuck, you're always a big proponent of the fact that gas prices, oil prices, kind of lead the economy in a lot of manners. So what are your thoughts based on Adam's type of businesses and local travel versus typical vacation travel in light of what's going on in the economy?
As far as how it affects Adam's
Yeah.
business, I don't know that I have a good solid answer. You look back and certainly we had an increase in the travel part of the park when we had isolation from COVID. So there was a unique situation that drove that as one of the few alternatives you had to spend time with your family and to do things. So, but now we're into more of a conventional type of situation. And when you look at those types of things in his area, there's certainly going to be an effect where people come down to Grove City in that area from Canada and other places far away, that's going to be detrimental to that. But on the other hand, local people who aren't driving farther away are more apt to come to an operation like that. So, Pittsburgh it's only an hour drive from, and so it's a convenient way to spend time with your family. So I think I don't see that the negatives and the positives. I kind of see balancing out to be a typical type of year.
Yeah.
I don't think there was the dollars and cents have been affected in our area, like where there's a terrible recession and people don't have the discretionary spending. It's still there. I think the biggest challenge will be as to whether people spend those dollars, going to the shore or going to a typical vacation, or they do the local campground, zoos, things like that. And I see this as being more of a typical year. Certainly the dynamics that make up the population will shift, which ones are here versus not, but I don't see it as being a big change year versus typically like last year.
Yeah. Well, you brought up something I didn't even think about that's really, I think, relevant to the safari park. Because, it's close proximity to the outlets. My understanding, and you probably know this more because you're involved in kind of the tourism community in Mercer County, but Canada is a big driver of shoppers and visitors to Grove City. And my understanding was that border only opened a few months ago, fully.
Yeah, well, I guess years ago, back when we were planning the safari, and even the years leading up to that, there was a lot of talk about the Canadian traffic to the outlets. I think that the way things have been for the last couple of years, it's not really been much traffic.
Yeah.
From what I've seen. From that, but like he was just saying, I think it's adjusted to come from other areas. I do think I'm not up to speed with how retail is faring in today's market or that sort of thing. But when you walk around the outlets compared to the local shopping malls and things, it's pretty well developed and open. There's not a lot of closed down storefronts and things, so I think they're doing well there. I think the big thing one of the big selling points I had to you folks and Progress Fund and everybody I sold the project to back in 2014. If you drew that circle around Grove City out about 100 miles, look at that radius, I think it was pretty close to 3 million people in population when you get up to close to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Youngstown, Erie, all those different urban areas plus the suburbs and everything, so I think there's not many places around the country where you can draw that type of circle and find that type of population and still be able to buy land at a rural type
At reasonable cost,
that sort of thing. It's not like we're in the middle of the city somewhere either. So,
right.
I think that is a big part of what's helped both the outlets and myself is we just there's enough people close by that we can get by even if there aren't as many people traveling on the interstates. The interstates are key too. We're right by 79 and 80, which are probably the two big ones in our area here. So that's a key thing for us with our billboards and picking up people that are traveling from one end of the country to the other that may have never heard of us otherwise, seeing our signs out there and stopping with their family. I've met a lot of people over the years that have come to our parks from somewhere, they're from a far distance, but they stop there maybe every year on their family trip just because they realize it's there and it's just, they saw the billboard one year and so now every year they stop and bring their family. So we have some of that, but I think that we also count way more on the local, traffic there.
That's a unique thing about your marketing effort is I think people that have never been to the parks are still familiar with the parks because you got billboards everywhere.
That's the marketing part's always a moving target too, I guess. But that was one thing that I turned my attention to early on for Living Treasures. I wanted to get on all the local interstates, both directions. Even if it wasn't directly putting you at our exit or that sort of thing, just to get the word out that the parks, Living Treasures was there, and now the safari. I think that was key back at that time, but now I think the digital marketing is a little more important. Some of the stuff we do that way is a little more intense than what it used to be, just because of the shifts over the years. People spend their time. Now that everybody's on
social media,
social media and on their phones so much. It's just the driver looking at the road these days. It's not the rest of the car. Just the whole family was looking out the window and you'd see the billboard.
That's a really good point. I never thought about.
I've got good friends in the billboard business. So I'm not saying it's a bad situation for us. We still have a lot of billboards, but I do think that there's a shift in priorities there because of how things are now.
Yeah. Well, again, really unique story. Hopefully our listeners there's been some bumps along the way, but some pretty good success as well. So I'd like to leave it with this. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs based on your experiences with these businesses?
I knew you were going to ask that. I thought a lot about that on the way down, and I guess the one obvious thing is don't do it because you think it's going to be easy. Put you on easy street. I'm going to put in a couple hard years, and then somebody else is going to take over, and I'll sit back and and that's not for me, anyways. Even I've been fortunate to meet some of the local successful business owners and developers, and the people that I've met that have been successful. They're way older than me. They're still pushing. They're still hungry for the next project. They're still advancing things. You gotta really want it if you're gonna do it. If it's just something that you think is gonna get you from point A to point B, it's maybe not gonna work out for you the way you're expecting. That's my best piece of advice. But then also, I think it's important to point out, early on when I met you, Dave, one of our first meetings, we talked about maybe buying a park in Living Treasures in Newcastle. I remember that somebody in the meeting said, well, Dave, he has never presented a project to the board that they didn't like, and I thought to myself at that time, well, that's the guy I need to impress, and I've put my mind to,
Well, I was early on in my career then. Believe me,
Yeah,
I've done,
well,
I have
things might
done
be
that
different. I
since.
don't know, but I know that at that time, just the idea that that you embraced, you pointed me in the right direction with the Small Business Development Center, and when I'm working with them there, they were a huge help at St. Vincent College for the Park of Living Treasures there. When I started working on the safari project, it was Guiher University. Jill Newcomer that was there. She was a key person that she looked at the numbers for me in ways that nobody else did. She showed up to my place and sat at my kitchen table with me and reviewed things. To just like you guys did at times to help put things on track. So I think as far as advice, you got to get the right people around you that you might know enough about if you're selling food or ice cream or have the animals like what I have, whatever it is, you might know enough about that part, but you need to get that support around you, the people that understand how business works, and some of the snags I have with permits for the safari, the Small Business Development Center, Jill Newcomer, she called people and showed up at people's offices and and did things to help me that I had been on the phone for months and months trying to accomplish things. She'd show up there and say whatever she said, and it was just problem solving. So having those people there that were going to try to help you, I think that's it's a key thing to try to develop if you're going to try to be successful in small business.
That's one great thing we have here in Western PA. We have a great support network for entrepreneurs. Chuck, your thoughts on and I know we could do a whole nother podcast episode, but what advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
Like I said before, you better be able to go to sleep at night knowing you don't have enough money to make payroll tomorrow unless the right check comes in the mail in the morning.
So intestinal fortitude.
So you have to have that. But more, in addition to that, you have to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you love what you're doing and you have that kind of ability to put up with that kind of pressure and not let it affect your personal life, then those are what you look for, and that's what you need to have.
Great advice from both of you. Adam, before we let you go, how can people find out more about the parks?
Find out more. Well, hopefully they'll show up there. That'd be the best thing. Up at exit 113 off of 79 at the safari would be, but we don't open until April. So if you're looking to learn about us, it's KeystoneSafari.com. Or LTZoo.com. You can look up Living Treasures in Newcastle. We have a Facebook page. We're on social media, different YouTube and everything. So, there's a lot out there if you start to research us. But I guess
April 1, right?
April 1st is usually when we kick things off. It's always weather depending. There's times where we push it back a week or two if things are too ugly, but we always set that goal of being ready April 1st, and most times we're ready and open as long as the weather allows us.
Excellent. So for all of our listeners, great opportunity for a fun day with your family. 2 fun days with your family. Got 2 different parks that offer 2 different experiences. For those of you that are interested in talking to us about future episodes of Inside the Vault or have any ideas for topics or speakers, you can email us at insidethevault@enterprisebankpgh.com, and you can check us out on all the major podcast platforms and in video format on YouTube. Thank you for watching and listening.